Trigger warning. This video contains discussions of eating disorders, offensive content, sexual jokes, online harassment, cancel culture, and allegations surrounding public figures. If any of these topics are upsetting to you, click off now. The purpose of this video is not to glorify, excuse, or desensitize harmful behavior. This is a long-form commentary and psychological deep dive examining internet culture, public controversy, creator accountability, and the possible growth over time. Everything discussed in this video is based on public information available, archived content, interviews, and public internet discourse. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is Rabbit Hole Radio.
Welcome back to Rabbit Hole Radio, where we discuss anything and everything. In today's video, we're going to be going down the rabbit hole of the psychology behind Shane Dawson's earlier content. Shane Dawson is one of the most loved and most hated creators on the platform. But when you remove him from his YouTube persona and see him as a person and all the stuff he's gone through, even before he had a career, it gets pretty dark, and there's a lot of trauma and stuff that goes into his earlier content that I don't think he realized that's what was making him want to make all this outrageous content. But yeah, let's break it down and see if he deserves redemption or not. The internet has a strange relationship with forgiveness. Some creators disappear after one scandal, others almost survive everything, and somehow Shane Dawson became both. He has been loved, hated, forgiven, recanceled over and over again. But I think that's because Shane Dawson isn't just one version of a person. Over nearly 2 decades online, he has been an edgy comedian, a documentary creator, a conspiracy theorist, a comfort creator, a villain, a meme, and for some people, he was their entire childhood. And that's what makes talking about him so complicated, because somewhere between the offensive joke, the scandals, the apologies, and the outrage, the conversation stopped being about a person. It became about what he represented. For some people, Shane Dawson represents everything wrong with early YouTube, but for others, he represents somebody who made a mistake, faced the consequences, and has changed. And somewhere in the middle is a much more complicated story. Because when you look closely at Shane Dawson's life, a pattern starts to emerge. A kid who felt rejected, a teenager who discovered attention, a creator who learned shock-generated praise, and a man who spent years trying to figure out where the performance ended and the real person begins. So today, I don't want to talk about Shane Dawson, I want to talk about the psychology behind Shane Dawson. Not to erase what he's done, not to defend every joke, and not to pretend some of his content wasn't inappropriate, offensive, or disturbing, but to explore a question that goes far beyond a YouTuber. What happens when a person who spent years feeling invisible suddenly receives millions of people's attention? And what happens when that attention becomes a thing that gives them their life value? Because in many ways, the story of Shane Dawson isn't about Shane Dawson. It's about what internet fame can do to a person. Before Shane Dawson was one of the biggest creators on YouTube, he was Shane Ya, a kid growing up in poverty, a kid who often felt different, a kid who got bullied. And while none of that excuses the things that would happen later, it does explain them, because human beings are shaped by how they're treated, especially when they're young. Shane has spoken openly over the years about struggling with his weight, feeling unattractive, feeling embarrassed, feeling like he didn't fit in. And when you hear those stories repeatedly, you begin to notice something. A lot of Shane's life seems to revolve around one thing: acceptance. Psychologists have long observed that humor can become a coping mechanism, a survival strategy. For some people, being funny just isn't entertainment, it's protection. Because when people are laughing, they aren't judging you. For a moment, attention stops feeling painful and it feels rewarding. For someone who feels rejected, that reward can become incredibly powerful. What starts as making jokes to survive awkward situations can slowly become a part of your identity. You become the funny kid, the entertaining kid, the kid people only notice when he's performing. And that's important because long before Shane Dawson ever uploaded YouTube videos, he was already learning something. People seemed to like him more when he made them laugh. And then the internet arrived. And suddenly that lesson got amplified thousands of times over. Because unlike school, the internet didn't care how much money you had. It didn't care what neighborhood you lived in. It didn't care whether you were popular or not. All it cared about is whether people clicked. And for the first time, Shane discovered something he'd been searching for his entire life: attention, validation, approval, the feeling of being seen. And for someone who spent years feeling rejected, that kind of attention can be intoxicating. Not because he's a bad person, but because he's human. The problem is that attention works a lot like any other reward. Once you experience it, you usually want more. And early YouTube was about to give Shane Dawson more attention than he had ever imagined. This is where something interesting starts happening psychologically. The internet wasn't rewarding Shane for being a healthy person. It wasn't rewarding him for self reflection. It wasn't even rewarding him if he was growing as a person or not. It was just rewarding people's reactions. And every time a joke shocked people, the views went up. Every time a boundary got pushed, the attention increased. Every time a controversy happened, people talked about him. Psychologists talk about this sometimes and refer to it as reinforcement, which just basically means if a behavior gets rewarded, the behavior will continue. Then the reward gets bigger, so the behavior escalates. And early YouTube was one giant reinforcement machine. The more outrageous something was, the more likely it was going to get views. And for someone who spent years feeling invisible, that kind of attention can become incredibly difficult to walk away from. Because eventually, you're not just chasing views anymore, you're chasing the feeling those views give you. You start chasing the validation, you're loving being accepted, and you want the feeling of being important. And over time, the line between who you are and what gets a reaction can start to blur, which may explain why Shane Dawson's content kept becoming more extreme. Not because he woke up every morning trying to be a villain, but because the internet kept teaching him the same lesson. The more shock value the content had, the bigger the reward. In my opinion, one of the most overlooked parts of Shane Dawson's story is his eating disorder. Shane has openly talked about struggling with bulimia, and eating disorders destroy people psychologically. It warps their self image, their self worth, their identity, the control over their life. People don't usually fall into that level of self destruction because they feel good about themselves. And I'm going to be honest, I think sometimes the internet forgets that behind the character Shane Dawson, there was clearly someone deeply struggling mentally for years. And again, this doesn't erase harmful behavior, but understanding someone's psychology matters if you're generally trying to understand who they became or why they do the things that they do. And I really don't think Shane Dawson is a villain headline people reduced him to be. Eventually, internet culture changed. What was once rewarded started getting condemned, and suddenly, old clips resurfaced under a completely different moral standard, which created a lot of rumors, a lot of accusations. The internet started labeling Shane as a predator, dangerous, and a disgusting human being. But honestly, this is where I think things became generally dangerous online, not just because of him, but because of everyone else as well. Some of the criticism was completely understandable and completely valid, but other accusations slowly turned into internet myths that got repeated so many times that people stopped separating facts from exaggeration. For example, people constantly repeat claims about Shane being attracted to children or harming animals as if they're legally proven facts. But here's an important distinction between offensive jokes, shock humor, and actual criminal behavior. If there was real evidence Shane was actively harming children or animals in real life, he would not simply be freely living online years later without legal consequences. Do you guys remember a creator named Austin Jones? If you don't, look him up, but if you do, you probably remembered he was sentenced 10 years to prison for sending explicit videos to underage fans. And there has been many other creators who were publicly investigated for serious allegations. Creators removed from platforms entirely, creators' actions crossed into actual criminal territory. And I really think that distinction matters because if Shane was actually doing something criminal and illegal online, he would not be here right now to make videos or have a new podcast. There is a very big and very important difference between this content was offensive and inappropriate versus this person is secretly committing criminal acts. Those are not the same thing. But despite years of intense public scrutiny, accusations, and internet outrage surrounding Shane, there has never been public criminal charges or verified evidence proving the extreme claims many people repeat online as fact. That doesn't automatically erase criticism of his past content, but it does matter when distinguishing offensive shock humor from criminal conduct. But I think sometimes the internet loses its ability to separate discomfort from evidence. And honestly, it's really concerning how quickly internet culture can turn repeated rumors into accepted facts without people demanding actual evidence beyond edited clips, reposts, or Reddit threads. And that doesn't mean the jokes weren't disturbing. Some of them absolutely were. But there's a difference between saying these jokes were disgusting and crossed the line versus claiming someone is secretly committing crimes without zero verified evidence. And honestly, I can't even look at Shane Dawson's comment section anymore without seeing people repeat accusations as if they're confirmed reality. Then, when I ask for proof, the response is usually go read a Reddit thread or Google it. And honestly, that terrifies me a little bit because the internet has reached a point where public opinion sometimes becomes more powerful than actual clarity. And to be honest, I do make music and stuff like that. It's not like I don't promote it very much. It's just for an outlet for me, but it did inspire me to write this song called Choose Humanity because somewhere along the way, people stop seeing each other as human beings. Everything becomes an outrage. Everyone dogpiles on somebody. People throw labels around as if it's their permanent branding. And once the internet decides who you are, it rarely lets you become anything else. I was debating if I was going to talk about this or not, but then I decided it was an important bonus chapter to add in just because it's another part of Shane's career that gets brought up constantly now. And that's his friendship and collaborations with Tana Mojo. And honestly, this is one of the clearest examples of how much the internet culture has changed. Because back then, when the video came out with them, YouTube rewarded escalation. The crazier the thumbnail, the more shocking the joke, the more vulgar the concept, it got tons and tons of views. And Shane and Tana were both creators thriving inside that environment. Videos involving sexual jokes, gross out humor, and intentionally outrageous concepts were treated as edgy comedy content at the time. But looking back at those videos now, a lot of people understandably feel uncomfortable with some of those videos, especially because Tana was freshly 18 during some of those collaborations, while Shane was significantly older. And I think this is where context matters because there's a difference between saying content cross boundaries and claiming someone is secretly a criminal predator without evidence. Those are not the same thing. What I personally see when I look back at those videos is two creators completely consumed by shock content and internet culture, constantly trying to outdo the algorithm, outdo the controversy, and outdo attention itself. But I do understand why people rewatch those clips today and feel disturbed by them because society's understanding of power dynamic, age gaps, and online boundaries has evolved massively since then. And to be honest, that's saying something bigger about early YouTube itself. For years, the platform rewarded creators for pushing boundaries before anyone stopped to ask, wait, should this actually be normalized? And to be honest, the only person who can really say if it was okay or not is Tana herself and how she felt during that, and if she's mad at Shane himself or the algorithms that push that type of content. Ironically, the era that built Shane Dawson's reputation back may also have contributed to destroying it again later. His documentary style content changed YouTube completely. For the first time, creators are making long form emotional internet documentaries. And honestly, at first, it was a brilliant idea. People felt like they were finally seeing the real Shane. They were seeing him more vulnerable, be more emotional, and they just seen him as more human. But I think Shane eventually got deeper into the creator mode, and sometimes he forgot the people in the videos were actual human beings and forgot they were more than just a YouTube video. Kind of similar when he was making shocking content in the beginning of his career. He got so consumed by the validation, attention, and recognition that he just kept producing more and more and more and more just to get those dopamine hits from all the views and stuff he was getting and all the praise. And that's kind of similar to what happened in his documentary era, in my opinion, anyway. But the series involving Jake Paul became heavily criticized because Shane brought in the discussion about sociopaths and mental health disorders in a way many people thought was irresponsible. And of course, there was the Eugenia Cooney documentary video. And honestly, that is probably one of the most morally complicated situations in his career. Because I genuinely think Shane probably felt mostly connected to her. He understood her eating disorder personally. He understood shame, bullying, isolation, and body image struggles. And maybe he genuinely believed showing her recovery publicly could help her. But helping someone heal and documenting someone's healing are two very different things. And I think that situation proved how blurry the line is between empathy and content creation. Because sometimes creators start viewing life itself through the lens of a storyline. Then came the collapse. Sponsors disappeared, friends distanced themselves, the internet turned vicious. And suddenly, Shane Dawson became one of the biggest examples of cancel culture on YouTube. But I'm going to make everyone uncomfortable for a second. The internet loves redemption arcs almost as much as it loves destruction. People say they want accountability, but what do they mean by accountability? Do you want the person to take a temporary break, lose their career forever, public humiliation, never being forgiven no matter how much time has passed? Because once someone apologizes, what happens after that? Can they grow? Or are they permanently frozen as the worst thing they've ever done? But honestly, the truth is, the internet doesn't even apply those standards equally. Some creators recover instantly, some never recover at all. Selective forgiveness is one of the weirdest parts of internet culture. And nostalgia plays a massive role too. Because for a lot of people, Shane Dawson wasn't just a YouTube creator, he was a part of their childhood. And that can change how audience emotionally judge somebody. Parasocial attachment is powerful. People forgive people they feel emotionally connected to faster than people they've never cared about. Since his last major cancellation, Shane has mostly stayed on a low profile. He makes smaller content, he has a podcast, he has a family life now. He is a dad, which adds another strange layer to the entire conversation. Because when people look at Shane now, they don't see the internet character anymore. They see someone older, calmer, less chaotic, and whether people choose to forgive him or not, I do think he has changed from the person he was at the beginning of his career. He's not perfect, he's not a magician that can magically erase his past, but people are capable of evolving. And I think sometimes the internet struggles with that idea because outrage culture depends on permanence. If people can genuinely grow, then the story becomes less simple. So, does Shane Dawson deserve redemption? I honestly think that depends on what redemption even means to you. Does redemption mean everyone forgets what happened? No. Does it mean nobody gets hurt by his old content anymore? No. But if redemption means somebody recognizing their past behavior, changing over time, living differently, and is no longer the same person they once were, then maybe real growth should matter. Because if the internet refuses to believe anyone can evolve, then what's even the point of accountability in the first place? And maybe the real question was never, does Shane deserve redemption? Maybe the real question is, why does the internet struggle so much to let people become human again after they failed publicly? If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. You get a gold star. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Let me know your opinions about absolutely everything that was talked about in this video. It is a safe zone to let out your thoughts and opinions without getting attacked or anything like that. Unless you're being blatantly rude, name calling, and just being completely disrespectful towards one another, that's not allowed here. But having a strong, valid opinion that's not argumentative, That is allowed. Because there is a fine line between being brutally honest and being brutally rude and abusive and hateful. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this, and give it a thumbs up so I know you're watching it. This has been Megan at Rabbit Hole Radio, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
You scream, be kind while you're sharpening knives. Cancel culture courtroom streaming live. You post a quote like you wrote the damn law, but crumble when somebody asks you why. You say you're fighting for the greater good, but you just love a public crucify. You call it justice, I call it noise. You're breaking people just to hear your voice. If you're so